Welcome back to a very, very special episode of the Nosebleed AV Club, or should I say the Nosebleed A24 Club, because we're doing another A24 movie. But that's just what we do. We're fans of the work. What can we say?
Undefeated.
Much
like myself.
My name is Matt.
My name is Austin.
And together we are the Nosebleed AV Club.
Your favorite tag team.
Your favorite tag team. And today we are talking about The Iron Claw, a movie starring Zac Efron and Jeremy Allen White, amongst other really, really, really talented actors. If you're unfamiliar with what the movie is about, we got our good friend voiceover guy. He's gonna let us know what it's about. So voiceover guy, take it away.
The true story of the inseparable Von Erich brothers who make history in the intensely competitive world of professional wrestling in the early 1980s. Through tragedy and triumph, under the shadow of their domineering father and coach, the brothers seek larger-than-life immortality on the biggest stage in sports.
That is The Iron Claw. As you can tell by my brother's nice, shiny hardware, we are fans of wrestling. That being said, prior to this movie, had no idea who the Von Erich brothers were. We got into wrestling around the Ruthless Aggression era, the Invasion era, which I know a lot of old heads weren't a fan of, but to us, that was the coolest shit ever. So
yes. So if you're like a non-wrestling nerd, that would be about like 2000 and up. So like that, the era of wrestling that gets the most shine is obviously the Attitude Era. Like that is probably the most popular era of wrestling, where like there was like the Monday Night Wars and stuff happening. But like we got into it right at the basically end of that era and starting the Ruthless Aggression era. So we came up with like The Rock, Stone Cold, like when they've already fully become fully developed, like the Hardy Boys.
Edge,
like that
Christian,
era.
Dudley Boys.
Edge, Christian, Dudley Boys.
Just that whole era. So that's kind of where we really fully got into wrestling. That's the peak of our wrestling obsession. After that, I distinctly remember when I started not watching, or when I stopped watching the first time. It was during the draft, the brand split. That's kind of where I fell off because I didn't have cable, so I could only really watch SmackDown. And Jeff and Matt Hardy, I believe, were on Raw. So I quickly lost interest and kind of stopped watching.
Yeah, our favorite wrestlers. Actually, yeah, you want to start this off by going listing off some of your favorite wrestlers growing up. So, like,
yeah,
I would just say jointly our favorite wrestlers were the Hardy Boys. Like, we love the Hardy Boys. We're big Hardy Boys fans. I kind of just like latched on to Matt. Matt latched on to Jeff, and then we went from there. Other than the Hardy Boys, I was a really big Chris Jericho fan. Really big Stone Cold and The Rock fan. Obviously, I feel like everybody was to a certain degree. And like those were like our main guys. At least my main guys. How about you for yourself?
Pretty much the same. Maybe add Rob Van Dam because of his matches with Jeff Hardy. Were always fun to watch. Of course, the Brothers of Destruction, American Badass Taker. I personally love. I know a lot of people don't, but
we
come
grew up
on,
with him,
man,
so like,
that was fucking cool. Yeah, with the motorcycle
1000%.
entrance, that was cool.
100%.
Needless to say, we are not familiar with a lot of the classic wrestling legends, which is partially why we were very interested in this movie, because it tackles these people who are held in high regard that we have no clue about.
Yeah. I feel like this is like right at the beginning of like, or like maybe like right before like the golden era of like wrestling takes place, right? So like your Hulk Hogan's, like Ric Flair, who makes an appearance in this movie, you know, like that era of wrestling. Andre the Giant, like I believe is considered the golden era of wrestling. So
yeah,
this movie I think takes place like right before that.
So that being said, I first heard about the cast before I saw what the actual Von Erich brothers look like. And it's cool to me that they casted some short kings to play some 6 feet beefy dudes.
Yeah.
So yeah, Zac Efron, Jeremy Allen White, I believe who plays David. His name is Harris Dickinson. Zac Efron, I think this is a really career defining role for him. I am a huge Zac Efron fan, actually. Like I've watched a lot of his movies, both good and bad. I know he had a dramatic role playing Ted Bundy, which I didn't watch. He was in Paperboy for a little bit, I believe, which was a pretty serious role. That movie was kind of trippy. I didn't even finish it, actually. I need to go back. But he was also in some, kind of duds that I've personally watched as well. We Are Your Friends, which was directed by the useless camera guy in Catfish.
Nice.
Yeah, I watched it. It's not very good, but it's a fun watch.
I have not seen Zac Efron in anything that I can recall, to be honest. So yeah, this was a huge. The only thing obviously that I knew about him was High School Musical. Like, it's not like I was hating on him for that. Like, it is what it is. Get your bag. But I have not seen anything from him like at all since then. And I haven't even seen High School Musical. So this honestly is probably the first time I've ever seen Zac Efron in anything. And I walked away with this. I walked away from this being very impressed with his abilities. But yeah, no, this is, as you said, a defining role for him, if you will.
Jeremy
brought
Allen.
babyface.
Jeremy Allen White, of course, from The Bear. A lot of people know him from Shameless, which I did not watch, but he's in it. Kills it in The Bear. Love that show. So I already knew he was just gonna fucking nail this. The guy who played David, Harris Dickinson, he's been in a few movies I've actually watched, but I don't know too much about him. He was in See How They Run, which is a murder mystery. He was in Maleficent 2. He played the prince.
Oh, wait, who was he in See How They Run?
He was one of the bellboys, I think.
Yeah, I've seen that movie.
Oh, you have? Yeah, I watched it recently too. And he was in the latest installment of the Kingsman movies.
Nice.
Yeah. Pam was played by Lily James, of course, Baby Driver. Loved her in that. She was also in Yesterday, and she played Pamela Anderson in Pam and Tommy, the Hulu show.
Oh, sick.
Yeah, which I didn't watch, but she looked really good in it.
That's all you can ask for sometimes.
And then Mike is a relatively new actor. The guy who played Mike, Stanley Simmons. Simmons, I'm not sure. Maybe Simons. He was really good too. And of course, the guy who played Fritz was killing it.
He did his job, man. Like he acted his ass off, and like he really made you fucking hate his character.
Yeah.
Obviously, we'll get into that a little bit deeper later, but like there's something to be said about the actors that play the roles that everybody is going to hate, because I feel like that's like one of the more courageous things you can do.
Yeah.
Because God knows you're going to deal with that outside of your movie. God knows you're going to deal with that for maybe the rest of your life, depending on the impact of the movie. You know what I'm saying? Like people might just hate you for the rest of your life, off of a role you played.
You always got to give credit to the people who play villains really well.
Well, especially the villains that people hate, right? Like, it's one thing to play a villain that people like sympathize with or like. So, like, I feel like Heath Ledger, even though he played a villain as the Joker, like people, if he had lived, to see it, people would have sang his praises no matter what, loved him. He would have gotten that love. Whereas a character like this, who is just so despicable, so unlikable, so just fucking shitty, like I feel like people would project all of the emotions they felt towards the dad character towards him in real life.
Of course, yeah.
That's just how crazy people are,
The crazy thing is, though, they actually like toned him down for this movie. So that is wild. But yeah, amazing casting job. Solid cast all around. Wouldn't recast any role really. The mom was really good too. She's been in a lot of stuff. I'm blanking on her name.
I would recast one role, but we'll get to that later.
Okay.
Yeah.
So usually on the Nosebleed AV Club, we delve right into spoilers. This is actually a unique situation for us because we usually do movies that are pretty old that anyone could have watched already, that are available on streaming. This is kind of the first time we're doing a podcast on a movie release, or a theater release movie. So usually we go right into spoilers, but for this one, I think we're going to give our first impressions as spoiler free as possible, and then delve right into a full discussion. So be warned.
So the Iron Claw, Obviously not knowing anything about the Von Erich family prior to watching this movie, I had no real expectations of this movie other than like it's a wrestling movie covering the darker side of wrestling that obviously that me being a wrestling fan, I am aware of. Like, I feel like it's hard to not be aware of if you grow up watching wrestling, especially like in our era where you had tragedies such as the Chris Benoit tragedy, occur. So like for us, like we're not strangers to that, even though we didn't grow up watching that era of wrestling. Like there's still plenty of dark stories that happen throughout the history of wrestling regardless. And like for me going into this movie, even if you're not a fan of wrestling, we watched this movie with our sister who has no idea about anything about wrestling. Like this movie hits, they do a good enough job in this movie covering a lot of the emotional bases that come with just baseline, like emotions that have nothing to do with wrestling, just the simple things of like parent expectations, the sins of the father, things that your father or your mom or whatever may not have accomplished in their lifetime that they then try to pass on to their children, growing up in like, a family environment where that wasn't necessarily our reality, but, we definitely got taste of it every now and then from our mother. Like, just being pressuring you to like be something that maybe you truly feel like you do not want to be or don't deserve to be or have no interest in being at all. Like this movie really tackles like that really weird family dynamic that comes with, just being being the child of someone that you look up to, that you admire, that you want to seek validation from. But at the same time, this person is also the cause of most of your pain, is the cause of things that, set you down paths that you maybe wouldn't have gone down if you had had a healthier role model in your life, I think this movie does an amazing job of taking that story, that could be applied to a lot of different things and telling it within the wrestling dynamic, introducing audiences to what wrestling actually truly is and, what it means to people, right? Like all of us that watch wrestling, we all grew up hearing the same shit, right? Like wrestling's fake. Why do you give a fuck? Why do you care? And for us, it was the realest thing ever. And there was a part of us, Matt, you could definitely vouch to this. There's a part of us that always probably knew it was fake, even when we were children. There's a part of us that always knew that it was fake. But the emotions and the story and stories behind the characters and the ways that these people put their bodies on the line are all real, and this movie does a fantastic job of displaying what that means, not only for the people watching, but for the people involved in it, and how much sacrifices they have to make, to put on this show for very little in return. I honestly feel like wrestlers are one of the more underappreciated athletes in this world because what they're doing is seen as being fraudulent or fake or for show, And to me, this movie was amazing. Like I would honestly recommend this movie to anybody, not just fans of wrestling. I would say that it's a great study on, the human condition as it relates to like wrestling, and like, there's not really a lot for me to really compare it to. The only other wrestling movie that I've seen is called Ready to Rumble, which if you're familiar with Ready to Rumble, it's like a late 90s, early 2000s comedy movie that is fucking stupid as shit. Like it's like just a really bad, raunchy comedy. The only other thing I can think of is The Wrestler starring Michael, what's his name?
Was it Mickey Rourke?
Mickey Rourke. Starring Mickey Rourke. I've never seen it, so I can't really compare it to that. But like I know that got a lot of recognition back when it came out in its day. But I've never seen it, so I can't compare it to that. But like I would say this movie was fantastic. And if you haven't seen it already, which obviously this part of the podcast is for you, if you haven't seen it, go watch this movie. If you have even the slightest interest in it at all, or if you just love movies that revolve around like, you know, characters and like them growing or the drama between characters, like I would highly recommend this movie.
And you basically covered everything. I don't really have anything to add to that other than, yeah, if you're not into wrestling, don't let that stop you from watching this movie. It's more focused on the family dynamics and the issues within that family. But the chunks of wrestling they put in there and the behind the scenes they put in there of wrestling is very insightful. I think you may gain a new appreciation for what these people do. And like Austin said, a lot of wrestling movies are comedies. This one definitely is not, although there are some funny moments. It is definitely not a comedy. But what I also wanted to add is, before we move on, is this is definitely a movie worth seeing in theaters. I'm notorious on this podcast for not watching movies in theaters. I usually wait till it's streaming, watch them at home.
Dude, Christopher Nolan hates your fucking guts.
I fucking hate Christopher Nolan. God damn, learn how to sound mix, bro. But I highly, highly, highly recommend watching this in theaters. The sound design is something I want to talk about later on, but it impacts the movie more than I think I imagined it would, and it really adds to it. And being able to watch this movie without any distractions, without reaching for your phone, I think it deserves that. So definitely watch it in theaters. Yeah, go now.
Okay, and with that, I think it's fair to say that we are probably going to start diving into spoilers. So if you haven't watched this movie, please go do so now. Stop the podcast, go watch it, and then come back and hear us talk about it.
All right, Austin, where do you want to start? There's a lot to delve into.
For starters, I was trying to commit to holding this the entire way through, but my shoulder is fucking getting sore, so I'm actually gonna put it down first.
Okay, Mike.
Yeah. A few things I want to talk about with this movie. Well, okay, so I should say that like I fucking love this movie. I thought it was fantastic.
So before we start, we watched this on Christmas. So yesterday, we're recording this the day after. Yeah. Yes, I'm sorry. We were those people on Christmas. I'm so sorry, but there was nothing to do, and we really wanted to watch this movie, so we did that. And we self-embargoed. We literally did not say a word about this movie as soon as we got out. We could not talk about it. And this is why this is a special episode. We usually don't do 2 in a week, but this movie deserves that. And again, because we couldn't discuss it, we just need to get this all out while it's fresh.
Yeah, we were just loaded with things we wanted to say, but we just couldn't release it. We were blue balling ourselves.
Edging so hard.
Yeah, we were edging so hard. Like now we're about to explode onto the screen.
Yeah,
much like the Von Erichs exploded onto the scene.
Yes.
You know? So I love this movie. I thought it was fantastic. I thought most of what it was really, really good. There are a few things that I do have gripes with. There's actually one big thing that I have a gripe with that I'll get to later.
Okay.
That I think kind of was kind of like a low point in this movie for me, for sure. But like the highlight of this movie 1000% is absolutely the relationship between brothers themselves.
Yes.
I think the way that this was handled and the way they went about it was fantastic. Like the dynamic between them and how much they actually love each other and support each other, and even when they're not necessarily getting along, how they still maintain that familial connection and how much they mean to each other shines throughout this movie. Like I cannot give the acting and the writing enough credit to how they make these characters feel so real and so like connected to one another. Like I think it was absolutely beautiful how they told the story of this family. If you weren't aware but you should be, because if you watch this movie, they tell you right off the bat that this movie is based on a true story of a real family. And I feel like it's very hard to talk about these movies without touching on that. So unfortunately, like I do have to judge this movie based on how well it tells the actual story. Obviously, you have to allow for some creative liberties.
Mm-hmm.
That's just what you do with movies based on true events. But there are some very glaring things from this movie that they kind of either glance over or they just don't even address at all that happened in real life. As me and Matt learned later on, having not known anything about this family prior, right?
I should say we both did watch like summary YouTube videos on the family, so we had an idea of what we were in for and kind of which brothers died and how. Which I wanted to ask you about that. So I was constantly waiting for things to happen. Like, you know what I mean? Like my mind didn't have to fill in the blanks in this movie as I was watching it. I was just waiting for like, when's this going to happen? When's this going to happen?
Yeah.
Do you think that for someone who's not familiar with the Von Erichs, do you think knowing ahead of time ruins the experience, or do you think it's fine?
I mean, I might be biased because like I'm a wrestling fan, so I just appreciate the story they were trying to tell. But I'd say no. Like I don't think it's necessarily like because like honestly, most of the time when you know something's they advertise very much that this was a true story, right? So like most people when they learn a movie is a true story, usually most people will just learn about the actual story. Like some of my favorite true story movies, the Titanic, right? It doesn't ruin the movie knowing that the ship sinks. Spoiler alert.
Well, yeah,
right?
that's kind of a different comparison though, because
Passion of the Christ, Jesus dies. Spoiler, like
yeah, but this is actually like the driving events in the movie were based on real events, right? Whereas Titanic is like, yeah, we made up a story that leads to the boat crashing. This is like, yeah, I'm waiting for David to die. When are they going to show him dying? When are they going to show Carrie dying?
Listen,
you know what I mean? Like, when are they going to show the accident?
100%. Like, I don't necessarily like the point I'm trying to make though, right? Is like all jokes aside, right? Like when you know something is going to happen, like the ship's going to sink, and yes, they're telling a story that didn't happen within the story of the ship sinking. That's going to be the pivotal point of the movie. You're just kind of waiting to see how they handle it, right? How they set it up. Same thing with this movie. Like, that there's going to be some deaths that happen because the first thing when you look up the Von Erich family is the deaths,
right?
Is the curse, right?
Of this family. Without going on too long about this subject, let me just like quickly like just paraphrase the question, I guess, or rephrase it. Like, do you think this movie has more impact if you go into it blind, not researching the Von Erichs, like letting the movie basically inform you about the Von Erichs rather than knowing about it and then going into watching it? Do you think it loses more? It has more impact? Do you think it loses impact? Do you think it changes anything?
I don't think it loses any impact. Like I really truly feel like the movie does an amazing job of setting up those moments. So like even if you do know they're coming, like I still think that they do a good enough job setting up to where you feel it, like regardless, because like the whole thing with like knowing something's coming is the worry that you're not going to feel it, right? Like that it's not going to hit you as hard. But for me, even though I knew what was coming, like when it actually finally does happen, you really truly feel it. And for me, that comes a lot from the characters and how they betray their roles, right? How they betray the relationship between each other and their dad, especially. And just like how the movie goes about like revealing things. So I remember this, I remember feeling while watching the movie like, oh, I don't like this. Like, I don't feel like this works, right? While I'm watching the movie. But then as things start unfolding and I start getting further along the movie, I was just like, oh, okay. Like, I'm not as mad about that anymore, right? So one of the early on things I can think of was like, I wasn't sure if Zac Efron was a good actor or not, right? So in the beginning of the movie, Zac Efron, the way he speaks, the way he comes across, the way he talks to other people, it feels like he's never acted in his life. I was like, this feels like bad acting to me. So I was like in my head taking mental notes, like, oh, okay, I'm going to hold on to this for later for when we talk about the podcast. But then it's revealed like, oh, his character was never good on the mic. He never had good mic skills. He could never sell a match because he just doesn't know how to talk shit. And then like, he's never been with a girl before, you know? And like all these things start happening where you realize like, oh, it's not that Zac Efron's acting badly. It's that his character is really fucking awkward, you know? And like, I was like, okay, I like forgave the earlier parts that I thought were bad acting more because of these certain details that come forward. Or like, for example, there's a part in the movie where Carrie, right? Who's the actor again that plays
Jeremy
Carrie?
Allen White.
Yeah, so Jeremy Allen White, he goes on his motorcycle and he drives off into the night, and you could tell like there's something wrong with him. He's super depressed.
Yeah.
And then the movie just hard cuts to him waking up in the morning, and then he has no foot, right? So it's implied that he got into some sort of accident and he ended up losing his foot as a result of it. I personally would have liked there to be something more there and for them to reveal more information. But as the movie goes forward and, you know, you start to figure out that like, oh, it's not really the action of him going through that and losing his foot that's the important part. It's really just the emotion he's feeling of, even though he's reached the top, even though he's doing all these things where his dad is seemingly proud of him, to him, in his mind, it's never enough because there's still room for him to fail. And like that eats at him. So like, even though I was kind of annoyed that we didn't really explore that deeper and get more information on how all of a sudden he doesn't have a foot, there's things that this movie
that's why I was asking
later on.
That's why I was asking.
There's things that this movie does later on that pays off.
Yeah, that's why I brought up,
you know,
does knowing what happens and the events change the experience of watching the movie? Because I already knew these were coming. Like, I was like, okay, Carrie's going to lose his foot at some point. And as soon as I saw him, like, as soon as he said, I'm going out for a ride after he won, I was like, here it is. And then when it hard cuts, it wasn't as jarring to me. I was like, that's what happened. You know what I mean? That's why I'm like, I kind of wish a part of me didn't know anything just so I could feel everything like in that moment rather than there it is. You know what I mean? Like,
So if you didn't know what was coming though, like, yes, the way they show that he lost his foot is like a reveal, right? Because they show him doing a bunch of other things before they show that he doesn't have a foot. I still feel like the way they reveal it is still like kind of like shocking, you know, in a way.
Which is probably
like,
purposeful.
even if you knew that the foot wasn't there. Because like, I don't know, they do a good job of kind of alluding to other things possibly happening, you know, even if you didn't know that was going to happen, you know? So I don't know, like, it's hard to say, right? Because we did know what was going to happen, but I don't know. I truly feel like it would have still hit just as hard, if not close enough.
I mean, it still did hit.
Or
I was just saying that, like, man, I wonder, because our sister was crying throughout the movie, right? Because she had no idea about these people, right? So obviously you get hit with so many deaths in so many tragic ways. So the tears were flowing, right?
I mean,
but because we knew
that's just her though, right?
No,
like,
right. But like, again, like, let's just picture like going in blind, right? And then you just get hit with this, and just the emotions, the roller coaster it takes you on, just the constant downs.
Yeah. So what were some of the things that you loved about this movie?
100% the brother relationship. The way they built it up was just, it was just so unspoken. They didn't have to be like, they were saying that, like, I love you guys and stuff, but like, it was the actions that they were doing for each other that like spoke volumes, right? And that's the first thing that hit with this movie for me, was just the brotherly bond, because that's something I feel like we share. And as siblings, we would probably be the exact same way if we had all the time in the world together. We would probably be doing the same thing. How Kevin mentioned that, like, oh yeah, I want to do everything with my brothers. Blah blah blah. Like, that's totally like, hey, we do a podcast together. We started a clothing brand together. We made music together. You know what I mean? It's just one of those things where it's like, yeah, I feel that. I don't necessarily want to live with you, but
You don't want to
but,
see
you
me in my
know,
tidy whities every morning.
No. But you know, that really hit for me. Also,
I'll get a cheeseburger with you, brother.
get a cheeseburger with you. But yeah, just the things they do for each other, how they constantly have each other's back, how they constantly support each other with everything. That's super like connected with me. Some things about the movie that I really enjoyed. The sound design. When you're watching wrestling on TV, you don't. The sounds are so thin. You don't. You can see that it hurts, but you don't necessarily feel it. And this is why I say watch the movie in theaters, because hearing the bodies hit the mats, just that thunderous drop. And there's a scene specifically where Zac Efron's character is outside the ring and he gets suplexed onto the concrete. And you just feel that shit so hard. You're just like, oh. And we've seen this time and time again in our time watching wrestling where someone goes into no man's land, right, and gets suplexed, and it's just like, oh, that sucks, but it never really seems that bad.
Yeah.
This movie did a really good job at selling that, like, fuck yeah, your air would get knocked out, you would be fucked up. And then another scene where the sound really hit in theaters was the scene where Mike is performing and the band is playing, and you just really feel the hits of the drums, you really feel the bass, the electric guitars. You just feel like you're there at that party with them, and it just locks you in.
I want to give like a really special shout out to the actor that played Mike, because he was phenomenal. Because like Mike is probably the most insignificant character out of all of them in terms of like the character that you spend the most time with, the character that you learn the most about. Like Mike's honestly kind of an enigma. You know that he doesn't want to wrestle. You know that he wants to be a musician, and that's really kind of the most of what you get from him.
Yeah.
You know, like,
and you know that he was
really
a good musician too. He was actually talented at it as well.
Yeah. No, and that's, you know, you don't get as much of the dynamic between him and his brothers as much, you know. It's mostly Carrie, David, and Kevin, you know, that you really get to see them really interacting with each other and stuff like that. Mike, you don't get as much, but for what you do get with Mike, I feel like the actor really does an amazing job of selling this character and really making you feel every moment that you have on screen with him. Like, I was very impressed with how much I cared about Mike, even though we knew the least about him out of all the other brothers. You know, like, yeah, I thought that was phenomenal.
Also,
did you have more?
Yeah, just the I love a good montage scene. And just the montages of them coming up. Scene? Yeah. Was just, that shit got me so fucking hype. That shit got me so hype. To the point where I was sad when it was over. Because that's... I don't know if you looked over at me while that scene was happening. I was like in my seat, just like, dude, as soon as I heard the drums, I was like, fair warning, though, that is where the movie stops being happy. That's like it goes all the way up there, and then from there it's just sadness, bleakness, just depression. But that scene, I wish it went on for a little longer. I wish they didn't cut away and then just fade to the end of that match. I kind of wish we saw some action in there. When they were, you know, when they all three were like fighting for the championship. But real quick, I just want to keep going on the wrestling scenes. The fact that they did them like kind of like you're in the ring rather than the typical wrestling angles, it made the action seem more like real and visceral, and you know, you felt that shit more. So
most definitely, dude. The wrestling scenes were probably some of my favorite things, because like I thought they did it amazingly well. They did it with such respect for what the sport is.
And I want to shout out the actors for actually doing the moves. Like you can tell that they went to like they trained for this shit. They were practicing the moves, and they looked good doing it. Like there's not a moment where I questioned, oh, was that them? Like no stunt doubles or anything like that.
Yeah. And like the techniques that they use where they have to throw the punch, but like, you know, obviously they have to fake the punch.
Yeah.
Like, and it's more stomping than it is actually hitting someone's face.
Yeah.
Like the way they go about training to make it look actually like physical, but like still oversell it and stuff like that. Like, I love that shit. There's a scene where Kevin is teaching Mike like how to do a headlock and how to lock it in. And like, you're not actually choking the guy. You might be putting a little bit pressure on their throat or their head, but you're not actually like hurting them, right? But like Kevin is really training Mike on like, you have to make it look good.
Yeah.
Like you really have to
the point where like,
sell this shit.
No cracks in the S or something like that.
There can't be any cracks. There can't be any gaps. You know what I'm saying? You know, like, and like that whole thing of like, these are fucking artists. You know, wrestlers are artists,
performers, athletes, entertainers.
And athletes, entertainers, like there is a true art form to this sport that people who don't watch it do not understand. You know, like how awesome and beautiful it is all in one, you know? And like, I think this movie does a good job of portraying that side of it that people maybe just don't appreciate or take for granted, you know?
And I want to say that a lot of wrestlers, you would think they're super rich. You think you know, WWE pays them well, which the top guys, sure, 100%. Absolutely. But a lot of these guys are struggling. They're not even they're independent contractors. So they don't have health insurance. Like they're putting their bodies on the lines and they have to cover the costs.
Oh, dude, like I love that this movie like really hones in on like what the independent wrestling circuit is like, you know, because like a lot of movies, they focus on the big guys, like the WCWs. Like I think Ready to Rumble focuses on WCW, WWE.
Oh, there's also another one. Yeah, Fighting with My Family or something.
Fighting with My Family or whatever.
Yeah.
Like that tells the story of Paige, an actual WWE diva, right? Like, you know, that's all fine and cool and everything. And it's always great to learn more about that side of the industry. But like the fucking wrestling, like indie circuit is like where fucking real wrestlers are made. You know, this is where like people develop their characters, where they go through the hardest points in their life, where they're literally their livelihood depends on whether or not they can create a character that sells, you know, and that's like the most stressful thing in the world that you can deal with, you know, because like you could be the best wrestler in the world, but if you cannot sell a character, if you do not have any good mic skills, you're not going to make it far, which happens to Zac Efron's character, Kevin, who is one of the more talented brothers, right? He's like the high flyer. He, you know, physique. Is the most physically in fit. Like
best physique.
He has the looks, he has the physique. He doesn't have the mic skills, which is you would think like as a wrestler, like, oh, he has everything he needs. He has all the physical parts, the physical traits of it. But the mic skills are just as important, if not more important, right? Like being good on the mic is so important in wrestling. And like this movie does a great job of like really pushing that and like showing people like what that means in this world, you know? Because like, look at so there's a scene where Kevin fights the current world heavyweight champion in Dallas at his father's promotion. And this guy's fucking ugly. He's out of shape. He's got no swag, but like his mic skills are way above Kevin's, you know? And there's a scene in the movie where after they fight and like Kevin wins via disqualification, like he has an opportunity to address him on the mic and he fucking bombs. He's terrible. And then his brother has to come in and save him basically. And that's essentially kind of what earns David a title shot, is because he has the crowd in the palm of his hands with how good he is on the. It's super awesome that they covered that aspect to it, because when people think wrestling, a lot of times they're only going to think about the physical shit. They never consider like the mic skills that go into it, you know?
I also like that this movie mentioned that, you know, Japan was where you make it, because it's true. A lot of great wrestlers come out of Japan. Japan has an insane wrestling scene, an insane just love and culture, wrestling, like professional wrestling culture. Like to wrestling heads, we already know this, but to the general public, the people who don't know wrestling, like that's huge for them to know.
Was there anything else that you loved about this movie that you want to go through before I go through some of mine?
No, I think I pretty much covered it. If something comes up, I'll bring it up.
Yeah.
But I mean, this movie is just all around is just really good, really amazing.
Yeah.
Like probably my movie of the year. I know I don't even watch movies, but movie of the year for me probably.
Yeah, I agree with you. The music and the sound design was phenomenal.
Oh, sorry.
Like,
Also, the look when they would show them wrestling, there was that slight like Vaseline on the screen fuzz that they put that really like kind of transported you to that time period, and that was really cool.
Like you could tell the director did his research, right?
Yeah,
or did their research. I don't know what gender they were, but did their research. You know, truly appreciated the sport and like what it's about, and like like for me, the biggest highlight for me was the actual wrestling, like you said, everything has impact. All the moves were there. Like a lot of the planning that goes before, like they show scenes.
Yeah,
of,
that's
them
the thing.
Talking
exactly. I don't think people know a lot about that, where they discuss what they're going to do, and even in the even when they're in the match, they'll adjust. Like they'll whisper this. They'll whisper. Oh my god, I can't talk to they will whisper things to each other's ears about like what to do.
Yeah,
like they'll change
they
it up.
improvise on the spot. Like, yes, it's scripted, but a lot of it is also improvisation. I can't speak.
It's late. It's late, but we really want to do this podcast.
It's improvised. A lot of it's improvised, right?
Yeah,
and like this is why me and you love this shit so much, because it is truly just fucking like. It's awesome. It has so many things in it that other sports just do not have, you know? And like, I think this movie does an amazing job of portraying the actual wrestling moves. You feel the impacts, the moves themselves, like they're well executed. Like, you know, like this movie has a plethora of fucking body splashes, in this movie, and like cross body, moves, and like Zac Efron performs them amazing, like the referee interactions, the way they sell the moves,
there's a referee who got like knocked out of the ring,
and he just,
and it just like
flies out the fucking ring.
So
dude.
fucking funny.
And it's like, yes, because like if you're a wrestling fan, dude, if you go watching wrestling, that's like one of the best things ever. It's like
the fucking Leo meme, dude. It's the Leo meme. We're like, ooh.
The referee, just watching the referee just die get murdered. It's the best shit ever, dude. Like, that stuff is fucking awesome. And then like showing like just the fanfare, that like these wrestlers have. Because like throughout this movie, right, you see just how big of a celebrity that Zac Efron's character is in his local circuit. But he's a nobody on the bigger scale of things. And I think that's very important to illustrate, is that he has women pining over him. He has people asking for his autographs. He has, there's a scene where David, writes in a postcard that like while he's in Japan, that someone confused him for Kevin, right? And that it made him happy. And it's like, when you're in the scene, when you're in this culture, yes, all these people, no matter how big or small they are, they're huge to you. It's a small world. But like outside of that scene, like these guys are still nobody. They're still fighting for a paycheck every day, and like I love that. I love how they portray that shit. It's like it's so true to the sport, and it's a true this. Everybody loves a good underdog story, right? Every sports movie that's like revered by people is an underdog story, right?
Right.
The story of wrestling is always going to be an underdog story because it's one of the least profitable sports. Every person in this industry, this is one of the few sports where there truly is like a huge dichotomy between the lower end guys versus the top guys. In the actual sport of wrestling, there's really only a handful of guys that are truly making money enough to like live the kind of lifestyle that other athletes live. Everybody else, 90 to 95% of everybody else that competes in this sport is living like paycheck to paycheck, or like, they're struggling. It's a hard life, it's super hard.
And the thing is, if you make a persona that does well and you become a celebrity off that, your likeness is not even owned by yourself.
Yeah.
WWE locks that shit up. So
Yeah.
it's a really like crazy thing. Like there needs to be a
You
movie.
don't even own your own ideas.
Yeah. I believe
know?
John Cena doesn't even own his fucking name. I believe the WWE fucking owns that shit. So anything he does, Vince McMahon is taking a cut. It's insane.
That's fucking crazy, dude. Like the way they accurately portray a lot of like what wrestling is actually like, I fucking love. The Von Erichs like dynamic, I really love. Like whether it's the family dynamic or like the brothers dynamic specifically, and like the relationship between Kevin and Pam, I thought was handled really well with the time that they had.
Shout out. See, here's some dating advice. Women, just shoot your shot. I guarantee you, whoever you're interested in will probably give you the time of day. Because goddamn, Pam, bro.
Yeah, shot her shot.
Shot her shot.
And here's some advice. And
Lock
here's
that
some
shit
advice
down.
to be. And here's some advice to men. You know, just be chiseled and fucking ripped out of your goddamn mind, and you'll be fine, dude. Like
I do. Hey, but let's. I want to do a body PSA. Look, these guys. Zac Efron is not natural. He did not achieve that body naturally. He is enhanced. And
hater.
No, he is, dude. Like, there's no way around it. He's enhanced. The only person who's probably like the rest of the cast, I think, is natural. Like, I think Jeremy Allen White's pretty. I think he's natty. His body is pretty realistic. But also, just even then, like these guys are pumped for each scene. You're not going to be rocking around looking that juiced all the time.
Dude, I was pumped every scene. Hard as a rock. Okay, so let's get into some of the things that we felt like the movie wasn't as good on, or like some of the gripes you have about this movie.
Where the movie kind of struggle or has issues for me is when they start introducing the deaths of the brothers. I don't know specifically the timelines of each brother's death, but this movie made it seem like it happened within a small window from each other. It was just death after death after death, and they each hit. But I wish there was time for them to kind of simmer a little bit more, right? To really see the impact that it had on the family, because you really only get that with David because he was the first one, and then with Mike's, like Mike's is pretty heavy, to be honest. Like that one's a really heavy death.
I think the lead up to it is very heavy, but the post death, it doesn't have the lasting impact that David's did.
Exactly. So for me, I felt like they just kind of like did it sequential. Like the sequence that they did it in was just too immediate. Like nothing had time to simmer. So I wish they kind of stretched that out a bit. I understand that there's time constraints and you want to tell the story, but also keep it moving. But it's also because like Zac Efron's, there's time between each death, but his character doesn't really age. Like the hair stays the same for the most part. They all kind of look the same after the deaths. There's not really a change in their appearance that signals that like, some time has passed.
Do you know the actual amount of time that's passed between each death?
I don't.
Is that why you're critiquing it like that?
Yes, because I don't know for sure if maybe it did happen. I can't recall off the video that I watched. I can't recall if it happened pretty close to each other, but in the movie, you don't have an understanding of how much time has passed between each of them, other than Carrie's, obviously. That's another critique I have is I feel like Carrie should have been flushed out more because he was the bigger star of all of them. Like he's the one who had the most success, who I believe wrestled the longest. And you really only get him for such a small part of this movie. I really think they could have done more with him and Jeremy Allen White in general. Like, they should have just had an opportunity to shine more.
So, like, one of the early complaints I had while watching the movie was, like, I wish we had gotten more, like, of the other siblings while they're going through their shit.
So, yeah, that's kind of where... Sorry to interject. I just want to put this point out there before I forget it. Is that... is this a movie? Is this a biopic about the brothers, or is this a biopic about Kevin? Because we really only see his point of view.
So, like, that's the thing, right? Like, so this movie, and honestly, it's our fault because the story very much is a Von Erich story, but the movie is very much a Kevin story.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's so if you're gonna know anything about this movie before you go in and watch it, I think that's probably the biggest thing you should know is that this movie is very much from Kevin's perspective.
Which makes sense because he is the sole surviving brother, right?
Yeah.
So he's the guy who's going to be going through everything, which makes sense why you would center it around him.
Yeah.
But they did market it as the story of the Von Erich brothers, which it kind
Exactly.
of right, which it is, but you
It's
only
not
really get it from one perspective.
Really, the Von Erich story because
Correct.
it's Kevin's story.
Yeah.
You know, and like, yeah. So like for me, like I do wish there was more of that, and I wish the movie was more fair to the other siblings. But after the movie, kind of towards the end of the movie, when you really just like, oh, okay. Because like that's the thing, right? This movie does a weird thing where like it makes you feel like it is the Von Erich story throughout the movie. But then there's little things that they do throughout the movie, and then towards the end of the movie, it becomes very much more obvious that, oh no, this is Kevin's perspective on everything.
Because after each death, it really focuses in on him specifically.
Yeah. So like, even though there's parts of the movie that kind of make it feel like it's telling all of their stories, it's really not. It's telling Kevin's. And if I had kind of known that going into it, I would have been a lot more forgiving while watching the movie.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until more towards the end where I kind of made that realization. It's like, okay, this is more Kevin's story than it is Carrie's or David's or Mike's or whatever. So like, we're not going to get those things. So it was one of those things where I didn't realize until after. So David, us not seeing David like go through his shit and die became less important, and then us not seeing Carrie like die and kill himself became less important. Like those all became less important once I finally made the realization that it actually was Kevin's story. But until you make that realization for yourself, getting up to that point, you are probably going to be confused. You know, you are going to be like, why didn't we see that? Or why didn't we get more of that?
Or like, even if you did kind of go do some research, like, why is this so much more about Kevin than it is Carrie, who, again, was the biggest one, who had the most success? But yeah, those are like really my two main criticisms. Other than that, like, I think the movie did a really good job at everything else. I do want to talk about one scene. But I'll let you your criticisms as well.
That also is something that I wouldn't necessarily call it a criticism, but just something that I feel like can be confusing for the audience. For sure is that whole aspect of it really is just Carrie's story. It's not the Von Erich story.
Kevin's story, yeah.
You know, it's Kevin's story within the Von Erich story. So a few gripes I have, right? The biggest one, because it's more of a character one, is like the mom. I feel like her character isn't really fleshed out. I don't understand her motivations at all. I don't understand her as a character, because there's times where you feel like she truly is the only one that understands the boys.
Yeah.
They confide in her. There's times when it feels like she's really the only one. She's kind of the glue that holds the family together, truly. But her character doesn't really portray anything that goes beyond that. That doesn't really portray anything for why. There's times where her character has an opportunity to shine, where like David or Kevin at the beginning of the movie tells her, hey, dad needs to go easier on Mike. You know, there's times when, you know, she makes it seem like her character really cares and like really laments the loss of her boys at the hand of the dad. And the movie hints at her like being aware of how problematic the dad is. But then there's other times where she just lets it go, or she like just doesn't do anything at all, even though she's showing all this emotion that she cares. And like, okay, you can make the argument that like this is truly the conflict within her. Is like, on the one hand, she loves these boys and wants to care for them and coddle them. But on the other hand, she is stranglehold by a husband.
Yeah.
That, you know, you can say that that's the argument, but like, I feel like the movie doesn't do a good enough job of portraying that. To me, it more felt like her character was just inconsistent, as opposed to there being an actual struggle within her.
I just think she was just a defeated person. That's just the vibe I got from her in the movie. Just throughout the whole thing, just straight up defeated.
I just wish the movie maybe portrays that a little bit better, right? Like, it hints at it, And yeah, you can get that vibe that, she wants to do more for these kids, but then can't because, she wants to be good by her husband and his ideals, but like, I just wish that they kind of handled that a little bit better because it just doesn't come across as complex as that topic should be,
Yeah, I think
as that
they
character
kind
story
of
should be.
they kind of hint to it at the beginning of the movie where she really just has no say in this relationship or over the family when he sells the car and he gets a new one and she's trying to argue with him, but he's like, no, I gotta do this. I think that kind of laid the groundwork for that's their dynamic. He's gonna do whatever he wants to do, regardless of if it's best for his family or not. Like if he wants to do it, it's gonna happen.
Yeah, and like, to me, there's parts in the movie where they could have like laid that in a little bit deeper, right? So, like for example, Zac Efron's character, in the beginning of the movie, goes up to the mom and asks, like, "Hey, like you need to talk to dad.
Yeah,
like he's going too hard on Mike." To me, that tells me that there's instances where there's a reason they feel that Kevin's character feels comfortable enough to go to her and tell her that, right? So she's done things before where maybe she does have some sort of say in this or whatever, and he feels like she could be the real difference maker, that he might actually listen to her, right? But all she says is, "This is between you and your brothers," right? Whereas, okay, we could have accomplished the same thing where she ultimately defers to them handling it amongst themselves because maybe that's what really happens. That's like the true story behind this all. But like her using that line to me doesn't really show that there is this, deepness to her character where Kevin would feel that about her, right? It kind of is just the same thing that the dad would say, which ends up being true because the dad does say that later on in the movie in a very pivotal moment, right? So it's like, I just wish that they did a better job of portraying the depth of her character because she basically becomes nothing more than just a foil for the dad, where she basically is just an echo for how the dad feels or is. Where like going off of how the boys treat her, how the siblings treat her, like there is something more to her character. We just don't really get to see it, So that's probably my biggest gripe with this movie because that's like a pretty decent sized character within the movie.
Yeah.
Small things about this movie that really bother me. There's an overuse of a very specific camera technique or angle that I think I just couldn't stop noticing it whenever it would happen. So there's a camera angle they use throughout this movie where it starts out as a wide shot and then as the scene progresses, it slowly zooms in on the action.
Okay.
I don't know if you picked up on that shot. So the first time I noticed it was they're in like the locker room after a match. It's early on in the movie and it's a great scene. It has a lot of impact. It starts out wide and then it starts to zoom in on them as the dad, I think, is telling David that he's the one that kind of has the shot at getting the title, and that he's the one that's going to pursue, even though Kevin's the one that's been the favorite to like get the title shot. And it starts out wide and it zooms in closely and becomes more intimate as like we start to learn the details of like what's happening, right? So it's great, works amazing, that scene. But after that scene, they use it quite a bit. It has a lot of impact in that first scene, but as the movie goes on, it loses its impact more and more and more.
I honestly can't say I noticed that actually. So that's interesting. If I watch it a second time, I'm gonna pay attention to that.
Keep out for that shot. It's pretty fucking overused within the movie, and I hate that they do it because to me, it lessens the effect of what it does.
Right.
The other biggest gripe that I have with this movie, and I don't know how you feel about this, is fucking Ric Flair. Dude.
That I can't believe I forgot to mention that.
Ric Flair's the actor that they picked to do Ric Flair was fucking terrible, and it's not the actor's fault necessarily.
Yeah,
I just think it was bad casting. The character, the way he talks, does not invoke Ric Flair at all.
Yeah.
He doesn't look like Ric Flair.
So
he doesn't act like Ric Flair. Movies are movies, right? If a character doesn't exactly look like the real life counterpart, I can forgive that as long as how they act and the way they act invokes that character. And this movie has the unfortunate problem of it's neither, right? He doesn't look like Ric Flair, and he doesn't act like Ric Flair. The way he emotes, the way he, enunciates. Like Ric Flair has a very specific way of talking, and if you grew up watching wrestling, if you grew up watching Ric Flair, you know what it is. It's very charismatic. It's very stylish. It's very like bombastic. And the way this guy handles Ric Flair's character and how he talks as Ric Flair is more direct. It's more to the point. It's not passionate.
It's not braggadocious.
It's not braggadocious. It doesn't have the confidence. Like he's saying things that are braggadocious, but you don't feel it. It's just not Ric Flair. Like it's just so not.
When he first appeared doing the promo, right? Obviously, the way he was talking was horrendous. Mm-hmm. He butchered the woo. Mm-hmm. Like, that was horrible. Mm-hmm. But I actually didn't think he looked that bad in the promo shot. It wasn't until he got in the ring where I would literally go, I literally did that because he looked so fucking stupid. Like, the wig they used was so terrible. Like, his hair was, like, so fucking, like, flat. It just looked odd. It looks so strange.
And if you know, Ric Flair has volume.
Yes.
Ric Flair's hair
especially back then.
Has volume.
Back then, it was just like a fluffy cloud, blonde cloud on his head. Ric Flair,
like, there's a point in the movie where he does the Nature Boy walk where he goes.
Oh, he was so spazzy with it, dude.
He's so robotic, it just looks so bad. Where Ric Flair, he has like some swagger to it, He's just
and then when he went into the locker room, it was just like a caricature. It wasn't like, it was just it looks and feels like a bad Halloween costume. And like, you know what I'm saying? And just contrasting it to the brothers and how much care and intricacies there are within them, just to have Ric Flair just be a caricature.
Which is so stupid because there's the most footage of him out of all of them. Like, there's so much you could draw from with him.
Hire him as a consultant for himself and give this guy pointers.
He's still alive.
Yeah.
That was the biggest thing that was bothering me, right? Like, I have these other things, and there's things that I think from the creating a movie standpoint are probably more important.
Yeah.
But as a wrestling fan, that was probably the biggest thing that bothered me was the portrayal of Ric Flair. Because I'm not even a huge Ric Flair fan, but I appreciate what Ric Flair is, having watched him for so many years.
Right.
Having seen him on the mic, his mic skills.
Yeah.
See him in the ring. Like Ric Flair is charisma. He is Riz. He's the Riz god, bro.
The Nature Boy, bro.
Like, dude, the Nature Boy. One of the fucking coolest, swaggiest wrestlers of all time, based not on some character he made up, based on himself. This is just how he is. And I fucking love that. And I just feel like they did him so dirty in this movie. Not on purpose, just for lack of I don't know if it's effort, for lack of care, or just like poor actor choice. Like, this just wasn't the right choice for the actor.
Just before we wrap up criticisms, a big criticism of this movie is what it leaves out. There was a younger brother, the youngest brother, who was left out. I believe his name is Chris. I could be wrong. So I feel like the movie did a wink and a nudge as to why he's not, or like to not include him. They kind of foreshadowed it in the wedding scene for Kevin, where they were like, oh, let's take advantage of the house. There's no kids. It's not like you can have any babies anymore. And I thought that was a setup for a surprise pregnancy that introduces Chris. Turns out, no, it's not. It was just them fucking. And like, I feel like there's no reason to include that line other than to tell you that, hey, Chris is not going to be in this movie. It was just so weird.
Yeah, so like going back to the point I made earlier, right? It's so hard to like talk about like a movie that is based on real life without comparing it to what actually happens in real life, right?
Yeah.
And like, that's the most glaring thing, is that there was another brother that is not in this movie at all. It does not exist within this film. To me, like, I do feel like that is kind of a detriment of the movie, because this whole movie revolves around like they make it a big point to like push like the Von Erichsen family curse, right? It haunts Kevin's character, like, and there's a point where you even think that him and his wife are gonna divorce because it eats at him so much that he thinks that his family's cursed. And to me, leaving out that other brother, that last brother, the youngest, is important. Is important to that because he is one of the brothers that kills himself, right? Like, David dies as a result of him taking drugs, like, unfortunate, can't control it. Yeah. And then Mike and Carrie kill themselves, but the younger brother, Chris, like, also kills himself, due to, like, I believe sadness from Mike's death.
I believe that's why.
I believe is the actual story. If your whole movie is based on this tragedy and just how tragic this is, like, this is just another layer to that tragedy.
I mean, I know why they left it out. Because there was an article that was published where the director says this movie just could not handle another death being in it, which fair, but then why include that line when clearly you're going to omit this character? Like, it's better just to not talk about it at all and then just leave it as is.
Here's the thing. I don't know if that's true, right? Because we've seen far more tragic movies, right? Far more tragic series, that like go all in on the death aspect of it, right? Like, make it as truly tragic as possible. Like, I don't think there's such thing as handling another death. Like, I think a piece of art should be what it should be to its fullest.
Especially to your point, especially because they do try to give it as happy as an ending as it could possibly have, with Kevin kind of coming to the realization that, that's one of the scenes I wanted to talk about is like the afterlife scene. But before we get into that, just him at the end, just kind of finally being able to feel and cry and show emotions. And, it kind of shows that he's kind of accepted things and that it's okay for him to feel these things, right? And show that he does have emotions, that this did affect him and that he doesn't need to just like man up or whatever, right? Like,
yeah.
So it ended on a slightly happy note to where even if they did include that death, at least the ending still holds the same effect,
We could have still gotten there if we had the other death or the other brother. It's just like this movie then might have been like a 3-hour long movie, right? Like, I'm trying to figure out in my mind where we would have time to include another brother, another storyline of getting to know him, and then like going through his death. It would be amazing. It would really help the movie have a lot more impact, in my opinion, because it's closer to the truth.
Yeah.
It's that's because like that's where true movies based on real events lose their impact, is when they stray from the truth. You want it to be as accurate as possible. Obviously, you have to take some liberties, but you want it to be as accurate as possible. So it gains more there, and then it gains more in the tragedy department because it's tragic and it actually happened. So it is as tragic as the movie makes it to be. It's not just making up tragedy for the sake of making up tragedy.
This family just had so many issues that you can't possibly just fit it into one movie. You know what I mean? Like, again, you wanted more stuff with the wife. Well, how can we fit that in with everything that's going on? There was just...
They should have done this Deathly Hallows style where they break it up into parts.
Each brother's death is one installment of the movie.
Yeah, dude. Oh my God. A trilogy of this shit would have been crazy. If in case you notice like a weird cut in the audio or the video, it's because we both had to take a pee break at the same time. Brothers in unison, you know what I'm saying?
I'll go to the bathroom with you, brother.
You know what I'm saying, brother? I'll pee with you, brother.
I'll pee with you, brother.
You think wrestlers like need to take pee breaks, or like there's ever been a wrestler that's pissed himself in the ring?
Dude, CM Punk shit himself
in the ring. No way, really?
Yeah, there's video of it.
Oh, I need to watch that. I need to watch that. That's crazy.
CM Punk shit himself.
Legend,
it got on the mat. It got on the mat, and the fucking ref like picked it up and like threw it out.
Oh, dude, give him a fucking raise, dude.
Yeah,
legend.
Right?
Yeah, dude. Like, yeah, this movie does so much with like the inner workings of how wrestling works and like all the things that go into it. Like, and I think it's amazing. But like, as far as my criticisms go, yeah, the real life shit definitely. I do think you
the stuff they omitted.
You have to definitely like critique the movie based on that. I
Yeah.
definitely think it's important. I would critique any other movie based on a real event off of that as well. Like how well does it tell the true actual story?
Mm-hmm.
Do the liberties it takes go too far?
That's why biopics to me are just it bothers me because most people will watch a biopic and they'll take everything that happens as fact. Where it's like, no, there is very clearly liberties taken. You're seeing things from one point of view. You're not getting the whole story. You're getting part of the story. Just like fucking Bohemian Rhapsody. You're seeing it from one perspective. Just take it as an interpretation.
I'm really curious to see like a breakdown of this movie and just how close it is to portraying like the accurate things. Like, because that's like one of my favorite things about
So when Carrie commits suicide, I believe it's the dad who actually found him instead of Kevin. It was the dad. I guess Carrie went up to the dad, hugged him, told him he loved him, and then like shot himself somewhere, still on the property, I believe, if I'm remembering what I watched correctly. But yeah, it was actually Fritz who found Carrie.
Damn,
which is a huge change.
Yeah, that's huge because like the movie, if it's not Kevin that finds him, it's Fritz. The movie does lose a lot of like the emotional impact, from it. All right, so I do think we should talk about one of the bigger characters of this movie, and that's Fritz. Right? We spend a lot of time talking about the brothers.
Yeah,
I do think Fritz deserves, talking about. Right.
So I just want to point out something that's interesting, because usually when there's a character like this, they try to justify why they are the way they are, or have some sort of redemption arc to where there's a moment of forgiveness. This movie doesn't do that. And I respect that so much because, again, from, what I've read online, Fritz was just so much worse in person. Just so much more diabolical. And the fact that this movie went easy on him and there's no moment where you actually kind of feel for him or understand what he's doing and go like, yeah, that makes sense, is crazy.
I'm of the mindset that every villain needs to have a motivation that even though you don't agree with, even though you don't think it makes sense or whatever, like you could still in your head be like, I could see how somebody could get to that point, right? Like some of the more popular movies that come to mind that do it are like Joker, right? A lot of people end up sympathizing with Joker on how he gets to where he gets, even though he's a sociopath, even though he's wrong, even though what he does is absolutely despicable. Like people can understand it. Thanos from the Avengers, like people understand that logic.
Did nothing wrong.
Did nothing wrong. Right. Every movie with a villain needs to have a layer of that to some degree because it's very hard to feel the depth of a character without it, right? Motivations are such a big part of what drives, human beings and human nature. And if we don't get a sense of that from our villains, it just feels so superficial and so meaningless. In a weird way, I can understand Fritz. He spent his whole life fighting, this fight to like get a certain recognition that he felt he deserved, and he never got it. And he felt cheated from it. And he felt like the only way he could redeem himself and his years spent in this business is if one of his sons could get that achievement. I really love that they spend a lot of time driving that point home. Like, this is what it means to him. This is what matters to him. And this is what the boys have to live up to. And it really hits. It really hurts, hits home. Growing up, to compare it to kind of our upbringing, our lifestyle, we grew up to immigrant parents, that immigrated here from another country. And the one thing that's common amongst a lot, if not all, immigrant stories is the want for a better life, the want to surpass what they left behind. immigrant parents they'll do the fucking most to instill that in their children, where it's like, you have to be successful. Fritz is that person, man. Like, he even sees, like, this guy has the gall to go up to his Olympian son, and be like, hey, like, this is the last thing I wanted for you. I wanted you to go and do other things.
To be fair,
but
he wasn't going to the Olympics anyways, so you might as well do something.
Sure, but like, he still could have compete. It's not like Olympians don't work for 4 years, right? And then they go, like, they could still compete while waiting on the Olympics.
I think because I think that's after all their world championships happen. So he would technically be on like an off season.
Sure. But like, even, okay, so like, maybe, for example, bringing that up, but like Mike, who wants to be a musician, right? He outwardly shits on like the idea of being a musician because he himself was a musician, and then he's like, there was no future in it.
Yeah.
So this is what I did, right? Like, he is purposefully skewing things or gaslighting his kids into thinking that wrestling is their only option. And it's not what he wishes upon them because he knows how hard it is, but it's what we have to do, which is complete and utter bullshit. It's what you're forcing them to do, and you're only making them feel like there's no option, and you're only setting up that it's a hard life it's going to be a hard life for them because you're going to make it hard on them. But Fritz's character still, like, you understand it. You might not agree with it. No, but I don't think any decent
you understand it to an extent.
But you understand it
to an extent. Yeah, you understand the initial motivation, right?
Yeah.
That essentially he wants to vicariously live through his kids. Happens a lot. Totally get it. But when when your kids start dying and you're basically like next man up, this isn't a basketball team in the finals, right? Where it's next man up. It's your kids, dude.
So like, and that's kind of what I was curious about, right? Like, I was like, was he really this heartless about it? And like, maybe heartless isn't the exact word, but like, you're right, like next man up mentality, right? Like, was he really like that? And like, I'm curious to hear
all
Kevin
evidence
talk about it.
Yeah, all evidence from what I've read says yes. Who knows? Kevin himself,
I would like
though,
to hear from Kevin, because like, yes, articles could say yes.
Yeah.
That's what it was like, but like, there's always nuance to certain things, right? Like, sure, like on the outside looking in and based off of the actions that we know about, it could seem like, yeah, that was the case. But like, there's always reasoning that goes behind decisions. There's always a lot of things that we don't see.
Yeah.
So I'd like really like to see if there's anything of Kevin.
I do have some news to report on that front, at least. So Fritz got cancer, I believe. He got like lung cancer or something. And there was an incident between him and Kevin where Fritz ended up pointing a gun at Kevin, saying that you would kill yourself too if you had the guts. And then Kevin, I believe, replied, "It takes guts to live." So, but towards the end of his life, Fritz eventually passed. And according to the video footage that I saw, I believe it was the Dark Side of the Ring on the Von Erichs. He goes, "Oh, I was happy my dad died because now he's not suffering. He's suffered for so long. I love my dad, blah, blah, blah." So there wasn't a resentment. There was a love that was there that, again, you're right. We don't know, right? We could only just judge by the examples that were provided to us. But because we weren't in there, weren't seeing it in context, who knows? Who's to say? But
did you look up at all if Kevin was a consultant for this movie at all? Like, if he
I didn't look that up specifically, but the scene I wanted to talk about in detail was the afterlife scene, because I believe that was a wish of Kevin's. That was like, we want this movie. I guess he wanted there to be like some sort of like
a happy ending.
He wanted to make it a movie about brothers, I believe.
And you know what? That was probably the best call this movie could have ever made, because like, if this movie had just gone the route of tragedy for the sake of being tragic, like, I think like it wouldn't be anywhere near as good.
Yeah.
because this movie focuses on the brothers aspect of it and like has these things that like relate to like what either they want to happen or wish happened.
Yeah.
Like I think it makes this movie far more beautiful and impactful than it maybe could have been if it wasn't for that choice, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, the afterlife scene,
Well,
dude.
I want to talk about that. That's the one scene I want to really want to like kind of delve
Oh my
into.
god, dude!
I want to know your thoughts on it and your
It was
feelings.
beautiful, dude. It was handled with such care and such beauty. Like it hurts, man. Like that scene, like it hit me so hard. Like it didn't get me to cry. I will talk about the scene that made me cry.
Okay.
For people that don't know, right? Like we have the benefit and the the beauty of having a amazing relationship, right? Like one of the biggest things that I cherish is like all of our sibling relationships, right? Like the relationship that I have with you, that we all have with our younger brother and then our sister. Like I cherish that shit more than anything in the world. So this movie especially hit for me because it's very apparent that the Erickson brothers also feel the same,
Yeah.
and like to have that scene where they welcome Carrie to the afterlife and like, he doesn't have to suffer anymore.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to feel the weight of their father's, expectations anymore. Like they can just be with each other like they've always wanted to be, where like that's the most important thing to them is each other. Like I thought it was handled with it was handled very beautifully. It was handled with taste. Like it was done very respectfully and in a way that respects the audience and respects the Von Erichsons and respects the story it's trying to tell. It's handled in a way that I think it's what Carrie wishes was reality. It comes off as. And like, that's all that the afterlife is. The afterlife is a living concept. The afterlife doesn't matter to the dead because they're dead. It's not like they can share what it is or what their experience is with anybody else. They're dead as far as we know.
Yeah.
So for us as human beings that are still living, we like to imagine these sort of things or think of these things because it makes us feel better for what's to come. It's a coping mechanism. And the way they paint it, it's like this could very well be what Carrie was actually going through, or this is what more than likely, this is just what Kevin is imagining his brother is going through, and that is what is awaiting him finally at the end of this fucking tragic story. And they cement that home because right after that scene when Carrie hugs his older brother that he never got to really know, that's still a kid, it cuts right back to Kevin looking at Carrie's dead body and kissing him, because it's implied that that's just what Kevin is thinking Carrie is experiencing right at that moment.
Yeah. The beginning of that scene was beautiful. Just him. I remember
beautiful, dude.
There was a little kid who was in our viewing, and I remember, so before you get to that afterlife scene, before it's the hard cut to Carrie being alive, he's just there on the table, obviously dead. And then when it cuts to him, walking out of the house and checking his feet and stuff like that, the kid was like, "What the?"
And then, I don't know if you heard this part. The kid's like, "Oh, so he's not actually dead. He's not dead. He's alive still. He's still alive." Yeah. The kid didn't like register that it's like the afterlife, and that's why he has his foot back.
Yeah. That kid was also so the shot, which was, we didn't talk about it earlier, but the shot of his motorcycle accidents where you just see the road and it's just so like chaotic is like, oh, the tension I felt in that. I was like, oh fuck, are they gonna like show it? Like that was such a good move to shoot it that way. Where even the kid, that same kid, was like, this is scary.
Yeah. Yeah.
That kid was feeling it. He was going through the motions.
I don't even think that kid was there in real life. It was just like our inner thoughts. It was our inner like monologue, like manifesting itself,
Did you also notice?
That's what we were all thinking.
Did you also notice the coin was tails on the boat?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, damn.
Yeah, because that shows that Carrie won, right?
Yeah. Or was it I forget who was who. I think
It
it
didn't
was
hit as
Kevin
hard.
that was Tails. So like he should have been the one to go. I think.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
I think that's what that scene was telling us. You were talking about a scene that made you cry though. I actually didn't cry during this movie. I definitely had me in my feels though.
So like, what's funny is like, I don't know if you cried or not. I thought you did because there was a part of the movie,
Yeah.
not in this basically the same scene that I cried at,
Okay.
where I didn't look at you, so I didn't know for sure you were crying, but I thought for sure you were crying because all I hear is like, oh God. You just say like, oh God.
What scene? Because I definitely wasn't crying, but I want to know what I was thinking at that time.
The fucking scene where he's talking to his kids and he's crying.
Oh.
And then he fucking, oh, dude, this hits so hard. He fucking says the line, like, because his kids ask him, like, why are you crying? And he's like, because I used to be your brother and now I'm not. And it's just like that scene fucking destroyed me, dude.
I said, oh God. I might have said, oh my God. Because I don't know if you remember before we embargoed or sometime during our embargo, I was like, oh, there's a line that they did that I really like appreciated. So that's actually a quote from Kevin, and it's modified to fit the movie. But the actual quote is, it's a fucking heavy ass quote, dude. I might actually cry saying it. He goes, I used to have 5 brothers and now I'm not even a brother. I was like, fuck. So the way that they like changed it to fit the movie when they end on that line, basically, I was like, wow, that fucking like standing ovation. Like I was like, God
dude,
damn.
Like that line destroys me because it's like, you know, I hate to get really deep about this and I hate to like bring this up, but like that's a reality.
Yeah,
you know, that's gonna happen to any sibling.
Yeah.
You know, including us, where it's like one of us is gonna outlive the rest of us. You know,
unless we all go down together.
I mean, that's also true. So maybe we need to start a suicide pact right now. But like, oh, dude, that line destroys me.
Yeah, that's
like there's like, you know, not to get too sappy on this, but like there's just not a world where I can imagine without any of you.
No,
guys,
trust me. This is something like I naturally like I think it's human just to think about these things, right? Like you know these people, and especially for us, because the only person who had a life before siblings is Drea, but we're only 2 years apart. I don't know life without you. Yeah. Right. And I'm sure it's the same. I mean, and Adrian doesn't know life without us.
Any of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things where it's just like, you can't help but think about it. And that's why, dude, the first fucking like half hour of this movie got me so hard. Like not because they're all so sexy. No.
Hey, yo.
No, I connected with this movie within the first 30 minutes because of what they were showing the brothers doing, taking their brother to band practice, going to the lake together, just hanging out, eating breakfast together,
stealing each other's food. Yeah, like that.
Just like, stuff like that is just like I cannot emphasize enough how much they nailed just the bond between siblings.
Yeah. Like siblings that like actually like each other, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think that's because like for us, it's like it's almost like a very privileged position, right? Because like there's also a lot of siblings that I know that don't like each other.
Yeah.
And like to me, it's the weirdest thing in the world because I could never imagine a world where like I don't get along with my siblings, you know, where like we hate our guts. Like, you know, it's easy to say in this moment in time, but like, you know, like I just can't imagine like money getting between us, like other things getting between us. Like that's usually what happens with other siblings that end up beefing and never speaking to each other again or whatever. But like that's just not something I can envision happening because it's just never been a factor in our lives. You know, it's never been something that's been important to us. And like I get that same vibe from the Von Erichsen kids. Like,
yeah.
What matters the most in the world to them is each other, and that's it.
There was one moment where they almost did that, though. At least that's what the movie was portraying. When he gets
And
disqualified against Ric Flair, that was an amazing scene as well. I think that's where, as far as the movie goes, where Kevin finally kind of like frees himself from the chains of like the expectations and the wanting to fulfill the dream.
I will say this, like, I didn't care for the Ric Flair character in this movie. I didn't care for the actor's portrayal of Ric Flair in this movie.
Yeah.
But I will say, like, the writing, or the idea, at least the concept of Ric Flair coming into the locker room and being not caring as much as Kevin cared, or the father cared.
Carrie or the father,
Yeah, and just treating it like hey, you like, I actually like what you did. Like, you know, you fucked up your title shot, but like, I thought that was sick. You can get a title, you can get a rematch whenever.
Yeah.
And like that being the moment that snaps Kevin out of it and being like, oh, like what my father was portraying, how I need to be or whatever, doesn't actually matter. Isn't actually important. He thought he fucked up. He thought he made the biggest mistake of his life, and he thought it cost him his title shot. But to Ric Flair, who's a showman who can appreciate a good show, it's like, dude, that was fucking sick. That was
good
awesome.
Call,
like,
dog.
Good call doing that. like going off the rails like that is good entertainment, because at the end of the day,
that's all that matters.
Legacy and titles and shit don't actually matter. It's the entertainment factor, you know? And that's the unfortunate truth about the people that put their bodies on the line in this shit, is that legacy is cool. And if you're one of the few people that are lucky enough to get a legacy in this business, that's great for you. But 90% of this is how entertaining are you?
Yeah.
And can you put on a good show?
Yeah, damn, this movie is just it's really good.
I
do have a question, but it's more of I think more fitting for the end. So do you have any other talking points that you have that you want to go over before we kind of start wrapping things up?
The NWA title is shit. I can't believe people died trying to get that shit. That shit is ugly. It's terrible. And the fact that it ends up in TNA you know, in its life cycle is just abysmal. Big Beautiful makes an appearance in this.
Oh my, it was so glorious seeing that, because I didn't know we were going to see it.
Yes, I didn't know either. Big Beautiful.
So when that fucking made an appearance, we were like, there it is. There she is.
There it is. Yeah, if you guys don't know, me and Matt both agree that this is probably
greatest
the best
title
heavyweight championship ever.
Time.
It's just fucking awesome, dude. You feel so baller
fucking
holding this
all
thing, dude.
Time, dude. It's not even close.
Yeah, it's not even close.
Not
Holding
even
this
close.
title belt right now, my dick just grew like 3 inches, bro. It's crazy. Like, this belt fucking means something, you know? So like, yeah, the fact that we got to see it in this movie, fucking awesome.
Yep.
Love it. We didn't really talk about Pam all that much, but just really quick to go touch on that. Like, shout out to her. I thought her character was really well done for the time that she had. I thought they did a great job of portraying like what kind of person she was.
Yeah.
Whether or not how accurate it was to the actual wife, I don't fucking know. But in terms of within this movie and just being consistent with how the character portrays himself and how they act throughout the rest of the movie, I thought everything was good. I thought everything was fine. I thought it all worked.
Yeah. So biopics don't often leave you with anything other than it being maybe a cautionary tale or even just fan service in a way.
Sure.
But I feel like this movie had a message to it, multiple messages. I feel like this is a movie where you learn about a family, but there's a lesson to be learned and a message within the movie. I wanted to know if there's anything you got from it. What did you take away from watching this movie?
For me, my biggest takeaways was just like ambition and like how, I mean, it's good to have ambition, right? Like, ambition is something that I feel like we all should have to a certain degree. But to me, this movie displays just how dangerous ambition can also be, right? Where like it's good to be ambitious and aim high for yourself, but like ambitions can also be the death of you. They could also be your downfall. They could be to your detriment. You know, if you see nothing else in life but the thing you're ambitious for, like it could destroy you. And like I think this movie does an amazing job of showing Kevin divert his ambitions. You know, at the beginning, near the beginning of the movie, he makes it very clear to Pam, you know, that he wants to be world heavyweight champion one day. That's his ambition. And he gets close plenty of times, but he never actually accomplishes it, just like his dad. But unlike his dad, he's able to take that ambition and put it towards something else. You know, where even though his dad also had a family, he doesn't push his kids the same way that his dad pushed him. You know, and he's pushing, his ambitions are more towards raising an actual family and being a good father, which, if you know the real life story, ends up being the actual case for the actual Kevin. Like, ends up having a big family, you know, with children and then a lot of grandchildren, and some of them even get into the wrestling business themselves. It is a feel-good movie in that sense, where you do get that feel-good out of it because Kevin broke the cycle, you know, and he accomplished what his dad could never accomplish. And that's being a good father. And not to say that he wasn't a good father, because obviously Kevin loved his father, but like being a good father in the sense that, you know, he was there for his kids and that he, you know, broke the curse essentially, where his father, if you were to believe that sort of thing, played into the curse, right?
And just to add to that, you know, I mostly took that away. And also, you know, just the idea of the sins of the father are the sins of the sons. You know what I mean? But the one thing that I kind of honed in on was the self-fulfilling prophecies that you can put on yourself, right? Where at first you get Kevin not really believing in it, right? He's just like, oh, I don't believe in that stuff. It's fine. It's nothing. But then as stuff slowly starts to happen and he starts to lose his brothers, he's like, oh no, you know, we are cursed. And that not only spread to him, but to Carrie, to the point where Carrie fully believed it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where he felt like there was no escaping it. And he just had to end it himself. I don't know if a lot of people have that, but I definitely feel that way sometimes, where it's just like you have this idea in your head of yourself that you think is going to happen, regardless of what you do. I don't know. It just kind of showed me that you can, you know, escape that no matter no matter how damning the evidence evidence is, you know what I mean? Like there is another way or a route to divert that. I don't know if this is making sense, but no, just that aspect, because I think a lot of the other stuff is very apparent, but I feel like this is like a little sneaky message in there as well. Yeah. There's something to be said about self-fulfilling prophecies.
To your point, right? Like, I don't know, like in this movie, like it even plays around with the idea of like, even if you fulfill that prophecy, that might not even be enough for you. Because like we as humans, right? Like we can have this idea of something that we want so badly, and when we finally get it, we don't know what to do with it, right? So like Kerry wins the championship, and it's still not enough for him because he feels like it's either that fear of like this still isn't good enough, or that fear of like I could lose this at any moment. I don't know, right? It doesn't really make it clear why he does what he does, but like he ends up driving his motorcycle and like getting into an accident that night. Even after accomplishing the goal that his entire family had set forth, you know, was to win the championship. He did it, you know?
But by self-fulfilling prophecy, I mean like mostly the negative shit.
No, I know.
Like we're cursed, something bad's gonna happen to us.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying that self-fulfilling prophecies can come in all shapes and forms, right?
Correct.
Like even it could be even in the form of even like negative shit that happens even when you fulfill the good positive things. Or like we're led to believe, right, that like Kerry's successful now. He got signed to the WWF, which if you are a wrestling fan and you know WWF ends up being the winner in all of this, right? Like WWF is the premier wrestling organization. Dad is cheering for him on TV. He's seemingly the most proud of him. You know, he's number one in the power rankings, right?
But
Like,
in
shout out
actual
to-
reality, the his time in WWF was like at his like worst.
Yeah.
Like he was rebranded. He was only in there because he was a Von Erich. And in the video I watched, they like this was not the time to showcase him when he was like, you know, had a handicap essentially. Like he was not at his peak, and that's when he was on the biggest stage.
He's seemingly at his peak.
Yeah.
But emotionally and internally, he's
physically.
at his lowest. Physically,
Yeah.
he's at his lowest.
Also, just knowing that about him, that he wrestled with a prosthetic, like
Crazy,
back
dude.
in those times, prosthetics were probably garbage.
Shitty.
Just fucking styrofoam pieces of shit, maybe. Like the fact that he was able to do that, and from what I can tell from the in real life, pretty convincingly, like nothing was wrong. Like he was able to hide it.
Yeah.
Like that's
And it's like,
incredible.
nowadays, if someone was to be like wrestling with prosthetic, they'd probably be like
It'd be a
fan
gimmick, dude.
favorite.
It
They'd
would
be
be a
big,
gimmick.
you know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? But like back then, it's like if anything
Any
got
sign
out
of
that
weakness.
if it ever got out that he didn't have a foot, yeah, it'd probably be the end of his career. You know,
Yeah.
it'd be seen as a weakness, you know, because like wrestlers had to be seen as like basically the ideal form of human being, you know, like they were the pinnacle of human excellence, you know.
Yeah.
That's why people like Hulk Hogan were like the biggest stars, because the long flowing blonde hair, the ripped
peak
muscles,
male
you know,
physique.
like, you know,
The fucking 80s fits, bro. Fire, bro.
hard
Fire.
as shit. The short
I'm about
shorts,
to,
dude.
yeah. I'm about to rock some
Fucking
short shorts
sick.
with a fishnet tank top and a fucking cowboy hat, bro. I'm about to
Hard
rock that
as shit,
shit.
dude. Hard as shit. I mean, even like the wrestling attire, right? Like Ric Flair, his robe.
Yeah.
That's fucking sick. Like I thought the Von Erich's like swag was pretty sick. Carrie's in particular, where he's rocking like the
Dude.
kimono, like it's like a kimono or karate. Like what are they called? The gi,
The gi.
right? So hard, dude.
No, yeah. The 70s fits. I'm
So
taking cues
hard,
from some
dude.
of them, bro. For sure.
No, real quick, I did have like a fun little like side question to ask, right?
Yeah.
So like, who's a wrestler that you feel like would have an awesome biopic movie like this, right? Because I have one in mind, but I'm curious to hear what you
From
think
our
first.
time or just
Just in general, like from what you know about wrestling, who's like a wrestler that you think would have like an amazing story to tell in movie form?
I feel like CM Punk might.
For modern audiences, I definitely think
Yeah.
that's
I think
that's a pretty
CM
good choice.
Punk.
I was gonna say Mick Foley,
Oh,
like because Mick Foley's one of those characters
that's a good one.
who's been through
Yeah,
everything.
he's been through the ringer.
all the different organizations. He's been put through everything, and he's had such an up and down career and story.
Yeah.
And like, and it possibly culminating with him winning the WWF World Heavyweight Championship. Like that would be insane.
Follow
you
up
know?
question to that. Do you think we'll get that movie before he passes or after?
I really hope we get it before he passes, just so he could have a say in it, you know, because Mick Foley is one of those people where I feel like he would tell his story truthfully and like not hide anything. He would be very upfront about everything he's had to deal with,
I'd agree with that.
because he's one of the most beloved people in wrestling. You know, he's one of the most beloved figures in wrestling, and he is somebody that I think has an incredible story, has an incredible come up. And just, you know, the reason why people love him is because he's so authentic and unapologetically himself. All right. So with that, how many, let's see, what item should we use? Out of 5 world heavyweight championship belts.
Out of
what
5
do you give-
cheeseburgers.
out of 5 cold ones. What would you give this movie?
So I was thinking about this since we finished watching it last night. And I keep going back between a 4 or a 4.5. Because I want to score it. I would have loved to score this a 5.
Yeah.
But there were some pacing issues I felt as we talked about, that I kind of took away. There's omissions of things
Yeah.
that I'm aware of. So I'm really, really stuck between a 4 and a 4.5. I'm gonna give it a 4.5 because I actually took something away from this movie.
Yeah.
And I connected with it, a lot of the aspects with it so hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for the impact alone, it gets that half point added to the score. So 4.5.
So for me, like, so how I kind of grade movies, right? Like, I'm not saying a movie has to be the best movie in the world to get a 5 from me. More than anything, in order for a movie to get a 5 from me, is if I personally would change anything about it, right? Like, I think if there's things that I felt like I could come up with that would be better in my mind, or would have been done better in my mind, then that's usually when I'll be like, okay, this movie doesn't deserve a 5. If I can say that I probably wouldn't change any movie, I'd give it a 5. For me, there's not a lot I would change about this movie, except for maybe the biggest thing is obviously just the Ric Flair casting, if you couldn't tell. Like, other than that, like, there's really not a lot I would change about this movie. Like, I thought, like, even though I felt like it didn't show enough of the real life shit that happened, you know, like, I still feel like it's understandable why it isn't there. Like, this movie would be so fucking long if it showed everything I felt like it should have showed, right?
Yeah.
So with the time that it had, I feel like it didn't really waste a lot of it. Like, I felt like it was pretty well. I thought it was all pretty well utilized, you know? Based off of that, like, I would have to give this movie a 4.5. You know, I'm only subtracting points from what I would remove, and what I would remove is the Ric Flair casting, which that's the reason why it's not a 5.
Our sister, not knowing anything about the Von Erichs, just watching the movie completely blind, gave it a 4. Taking her score into consideration, the Iron Claw gets a 4.3 from the Nosebleed AV Club, which
the Iron Claw coming straight to you.
Highest score for a movie so far.
And listen, we might be just riding the high of recency bias, but like, I really walked out of this theater loving this movie.
So did I.
And it hurt. It physically hurt me to not talk about it.
Same.
You know?
Same. I definitely think it's a must-see. Try to watch it in theaters if you can. It is well worth your money and your time.
I would definitely call this, as far as I've seen, the best wrestling movie.
That being said, thanks for listening. You can follow us on Instagram at Nosebleed AV Club. My Instagram is at Nosebleed Matt. The champs is
Nosebleed Daniel.
And we are now on TikTok.
That's news to me. What the fuck?
Yeah. I made a TikTok for us.
Dude,
so
sick.
It's
hell yeah, brother.
Nosebleed AV Club. So go ahead and give that a follow. And
I'll sign up for TikTok with you, brother.
And of course, if you're old school and like websites, you can find us at nosebleedav.club. If you're listening to this on Apple or Spotify, give us the follow, give us a rating. If you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe, like, comment, do all those things. And we'll see you on the next one. We are trying to reach 10 million subscribers by the new year. So please help us out and hit that follow and subscribe button. Thanks for listening / watching. Have a good night. See you later.
Thank you guys. Later.
Peace.